call that was given to me was done at like 4:30 on a Friday, and like that bomb was dropped on me in the last 15 minutes of that job or of that call. And he was
Mm-hmm.
like, so as of the end of this call, like you're terminated. Or like we're gonna be parting ways. And I was like,
Uh,
what? I was like, wait, like right now? You mean right now? Like this is not a drill. And so yeah, it was just like it affects me to this day, even when I'm working for a company that I'm happy with, like I I am working myself a lot these days because I'm like, I can't get fired. I can't get let go. I cannot
yeah.
give this company any reason to do the same thing that the last company did for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I think I'm I'm still unpacking that trauma.
Yeah.
So it is very much to your benefit to like take the time to unpack that trauma up front rather than like trying to do it while simultaneously job searching. I've spent a lot of time justifying to myself that, hey, like this is where I'm supposed to be. But maturity is recognizing that where you are now might not be where you are forever. And so being married to one specific title or one specific field, it just
Mm-hmm.
like kind of set you up for disappointment. And so you kind of have to take things in stride and just be receptive to a lot of different opportunities.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Success Beyond Our Greatest Fears. I'm your host, Sonali Kumar, and today I'm very excited to welcome our guest. She's someone who went from working at one of the top four accounting firms to someone who's made a great name for herself in the data space. She's also a LinkedIn instructor and a LinkedIn celebrity, so I'm definitely excited to have her on board. Please help me welcome Megan Liu. Welcome, Megan. I'm really excited to have you today.
Thank you, Sonali. I'm excited to be here. LinkedIn celebrity is somewhat of a like overstatement. I think like if I were ever like recognized consistently on the streets, like that's what I consider celebrity, and that is far from the reality. So I'm not.
I
But I
bet you would walk down, like you would walk to an event or you would walk down the street, you'd definitely have people stop you and be like, "Are you Megan?"
I actually did have that happen last week when I was at a data conference, and I was like,
Hmm.
really happening? It was so surreal. Like, wait a second. But like that was just one time. So, it's
It
all good.
counts.
I will take that.
Good. But before we get started, I have a lot of questions for you today. I do want to give you the floor to just introduce yourself to our audience.
Great. Yeah, I am Megan. I met Sonali a couple years ago. I think we were doing like a mock interview for like a data
Yeah.
analyst position or something. So that's how our paths crossed. But that was via LinkedIn. And as Sonali mentioned, LinkedIn is where I live and breathe and eat because I completely credit LinkedIn for me being where I am today in terms of my career, a lot of the friends that I've made, and that career specifically was is in the data space. I started off in this field as a data analyst, then became a data scientist, and now I am a developer advocate at a data science company. So each role that I've had in the data space has been a little bit different, but they have really drawn on each other in terms of the learning lessons and like my progression in
Hmm.
this field. Because yeah, I've never had like just one role that I um, have continued to be at another place. Like
Hmm.
each transition that I've had has been like a different step in my life. And so I'm appreciative of the learning lessons that have come out of that.
Yeah. I actually love that you said that. And it wasn't something I think I read on your profile too, saying that initially in your career, you didn't really recognize connecting those dots, even though it's different careers, you were taking different jobs and it just felt
Mhm.
so scattered. But now
Yeah.
it just feels like one thing leads to another. And there are some, points that you can tie to each other so you can kind of connect the dots. And it feels
Yeah.
like you're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that was in reference to all the different jobs that I've had before data.
Hmm.
They're all internships and stuff. But yeah, I've had internships in real estate, wealth management, insurance, marketing and sales. And so I don't think that that is too out of the ordinary for people who are starting off their careers and having internships. Like they just
Hmm.
take whatever they can get. But
Yeah.
yeah, in the moment when I had those internships, I was like, none of this has to do with each other. I'm just like kind of floating by because I never found that field that I think I
Mm.
belonged in. And then I found data and I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Now as I'm a couple years into this field of data science, I'm wondering, I'm like, okay, I think I've spent a lot of time justifying to myself that, hey, like this is where I'm supposed to be. But maturity is recognizing that where you are now might not be where you are forever. And so being married to one specific title or one specific field, it just
Mhm.
like kind of set you up for disappointment. And so you kind of have to take things in stride and just be receptive to a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah.
Because now in my stage of career, I'm just like, I really do love this field, but in a couple of years, it could be something totally different, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I love that you say that. The last person I had talked to for this podcast purposes as well, they had mentioned the difference between chasing your passion and I forgot the word that they used, but passion tends to, or your current passion tends to put you in a box if you don't chase your curiosity. Because if you don't feel passionate about what you're currently doing and you stop
Mm,
chasing the curiosity that you have, you feel you're gonna put yourself in a box and no longer enjoy what you're doing,
I love that.
which
I
is
love that.
very powerful. And it ties into what you just said too. And it kind of makes me want to go to your career transition before you even got to the data, right?
Mhm.
I assumed it was not easy and a lot of barriers that you had to overcome. So tell me a little bit more about that transition, the initial transition into data.
Yeah, I was working a financial consultant role at one of the big four firms, and at the end of my 2 years there, which now looking back is like the longest I've ever spent at any company. At the end of my 2 years there, I was like, I'm so burnt out
Mhm.
and I don't enjoy this field that I went to school for. And it felt wrong in the moment because I was like, I've spent so much time and money studying to be in this field. And
Mhm.
so having to admit to myself that it wasn't working out was something that was a very scary admission to myself. But once you do accept it, kind of the world is your oyster because you're no longer held back by your own limiting beliefs. And once I admitted to myself that I needed to get out of that, was when I started to evaluate all of my different skill sets and what I actually wanted to do. And I thought back to a course that I had taken, like one course that I had taken in college called business analytics. And in that class, got exposure to um, data analysis using like Tableau, Power BI, also some very intro learnings to machine learning models and things like that. And I was like, okay, this is somewhat of a technical skill that I have. So let me lean into that. And had no idea what I was getting myself into, but it turned out to be good because I was just like, I have to go forward with this and not look back. Because before I made that decision, I was kind of dabbling between like, hey, I want to try to apply to other financial analyst roles,
Mhm.
or I want to try out this data thing. But when you pick a path, especially during a career transition, you have to like have conviction that that is the path for you and just go down that path without looking back.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. And even when I was like 3 months into that job search and getting a lot of rejection still, I was like, nope, just gotta keep going. Gotta stick with this decision that I made. And so eventually after like 4 months, I think I landed a role at another consultancy in DC
Hmm.
where I was an analytics consultant. And that was where I learned most of my like technical data skills. After that, I that was when I became a data scientist. And then following that, I am now a data advocate.
I love that. I love the journey, and you've hit on so many different points. And it sounded like one of the things that you really had to remind yourself was not to tie yourself to your previous identity of working at an account in accounting, right? And
Yeah,
being able to pivot into a whole new career also required you to let go of a part of yourself that you held on so closely.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's
I was
not
definitely
easy.
never an accountant. It was I was so the big four firms, like I think they're just as well known for their accounting as their like consultancy. But yeah, accounting was never ever my thing. Like that was one
Yeah,
field in college that I had completely ruled out. I was like, I will never become an
not
accountant.
be in this. Yeah.
I just could not do what it took to be an
Hmm.
accountant. But yeah, like that previous identity of mine was formed from experiences in school, like experiences comparing myself to peers who are also in the field, and it seemed
Yeah.
like they were massively successful being investment bankers and like
Yeah.
consultants at in like McKinsey, BCG, and stuff like that. So I was
Mm.
just like, if they could do it, why can't I? Like this was
Yeah.
I started I started down this path of the financial world, the consulting world, that identity, the same time that like my peers did. And so when I saw that they seemed successful in it, I was like,
Hmm.
why can't I be successful in it?
Yeah.
Which speaks to like there's no point in really comparing your path to others because one, you never know what is going on behind the scenes for them. And two, it's just like it's just not relevant for your own path.
Yeah. So do you feel like you ended up pursuing the consulting route because you were consistently, looking at your peers, what they were doing, and that's why that option felt more feasible in that moment?
Yeah, I was what I was really pursuing was finance.
Hmm.
And the finance role that I landed happened to be at a consulting firm. And that consulting firm was one that was pretty well known in my undergraduate school. Like a lot of people went to that company
Yeah.
after college. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna fall into
Yeah.
this pipeline and just like, see where
Yeah.
this takes me. And so because so many people had been placed into that company from my school, I was like, yeah, like this,
Huh.
I am another one of those people.
Yeah.
But being another one of the many people in
Hmm.
a path is like, I found it was not a good thing.
Yeah. And I'm glad you took the moment when you were transitioning to realize what path you wanted to take, not necessarily what everyone else took, and just followed that. And
Yeah,
I think I've seen your progression. It's just on LinkedIn because that's when we met. And it's been wonderful to see because it seems like it's a field that you actually want to be in, you enjoy being a part of. And you're right, you don't have to stay in the field forever. You're making the commitment for a year, 2 year, 3 years, right? And your
right.
passion, your curiosity can change. And
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, I know you mentioned a little bit when you were transitioning, you faced a lot of rejections, especially for like 3 to 4 months, but you kept having to remind yourself, like, keep going. You can't stop
Hmm.
now just because of the rejection. What was that process like? How did that, for me, getting rejections, it really hurt my self-esteem or
Oh,
my
for sure.
ego, both, right? And
Yeah.
I assume you probably struggle with that too. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your process with dealing with that.
Yeah, my process for dealing with that was like my alternative of staying here is worse. Like I
Mm,
really hated that job towards the end.
yeah,
Um, to to not mince any words, like
yeah,
I was like, I either tough it out and face these rejections, or I stay stagnant at this job that I hate. And I was like,
yeah,
the latter is much worse.
yeah,
So rejection like
hmm,
sounds fine in comparison,
yeah,
but the rejections themselves, of course, like they never feel good
mm,
in isolation. You like I said, you just have to keep in mind the end goal that you have for yourself
yeah,
and remind yourself of your why you're doing it every day. And for
hmm,
me, it was getting out of that company.
yeah,
So I yeah, I just used that as my fuel. It was a negative piece of fuel, but
hmm.
it was driving nonetheless.
Yeah, I think it's like you said, like focusing on your why. And for you, it's more of you want to be happy where you're working versus being upset going to
Yeah,
work because you're going to be working almost every single day. So you want to make sure that you actually enjoy it.
for
And I
sure,
don't
for
think
sure.
there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, and I know it might be a touchy topic for you and maybe for the listeners too, your process of your recent layoff. I know
Hmm.
that was really tough and that was a very hard thing to go through for anyone, right? And you went through it personally very recently. What
Hmm.
was that like? What was the moment it happened and your post layoff journey?
Yeah, the moment it happened, it was just shock to the point where like I couldn't even cry, like I had
Yeah.
words because yeah, there were no indications that that was going to happen. And when I was at a small company like that, um it was 6 people at the time. I was the sixth person. And at a small company like that, you can't really call it a layoff. Like they were just letting me go, and they were like,
Wow.
like this is not something that is done like a typical large companies layoff. They're telling me, they're just like, we are just parting ways because like this is not working out. And so that's even worse than like
Yeah.
just be a a pawn that was like let go in a mass layoff. I think it was just like you're in such an intimate environment where you
Hmm.
know everybody, like you know the five other people in your company, and they're just like, this is not working out. And I was just like, but I like we work together, we're so close. What do you mean? Like in that moment, yes, I couldn't really let out react like
Hmm.
emotions. It was so shocking, but at the same time, the most shocking part was the emotional part because I was like, what I was like, but we are a team. We're like a family. We're a very close knit group, right? So like, what do you mean you're just gonna let me go? Like, and so and also being 1/6 of the company, I was like, but like that is such a big percentage of your
Yeah.
company. And so all these emotions were going through my head, and I was like, it was just that question of like, how could you,
Yeah.
It took me a lot of time to reflect on that, to be like, oh, the how is because of it's a business need. It is it is in their best financial interest to do this thing. And regardless of how close you are to your manager, your CEO, regardless of those relationships, it just had to be done. And so it did take a lot of reflection for me to finally wrap my head around that it was like not a personal thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I could still be mad about it.
Yeah.
And so also in that time of wrapping my head around the situation was just processing my own emotions around it,
Yeah.
because that initial shock, it lasted for a couple days, right? And
Yeah.
I really should have done was take some time to not jump immediately back into the job
Mm-hmm.
search.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it was a pretty desperate situation. I
Yeah.
was living by myself. I had a mortgage to pay,
Yeah.
and I was given 2 weeks of severance. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I just didn't take the time to process it. And it wasn't until after I landed my next job that I was like, okay, let's unpack this trauma. And what I recommend to other people is like unpack that trauma first so that you can become somewhat of a whole human
Mm-hmm.
being before you jump into yet another traumatic experience, which is the job search.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that. So I didn't follow, I can't follow my own advice, but like, looking back, that is what I should have done, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. And so that month was like hell. It was hell. I thought I thought that my first job search, where I was describing to you, like it took me 4 months to get my first data role. I thought that was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do. But this was so much worse, even though this only took me a month. It was
Mm-hmm.
like all the horrors of those 4 months in my first job search, like squeezed into
Wow.
one.
Yeah.
And it was hell. And I think that if I had taken the time to sort out my emotions, it it could have been a little bit better. I could have set myself up better
Yeah.
mentally.
Yeah.
Because yeah, like throughout that month of job searching, I was just like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like I can't believe I was
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I can't believe I'm scrambling for my life. And that disbelief was from me not having taken that time to process my
Yeah.
emotions and like reset myself fully before I
Yeah.
jumped back into the job search. So that is my advice for anybody who is let go
Yeah.
or let off or separated from their company.
Mm-hmm.
Take the time to like process the trauma, because it is totally trauma, and that trauma will stick with you for a long
Yeah.
time. I like it affects me to this day, even when I'm working for a company that I'm happy with. Like I I am working myself a lot these days because I'm like, I can't get fired. I can't get let go. I cannot
Yeah.
give this company any reason to do the same thing that the last company did for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I think I'm I'm still unpacking that trauma.
Yeah.
So it is very much to your benefit to like take the time to unpack that trauma up front rather than like trying to do it while simultaneously job searching.
Yeah. And there was so much to unpack, and it wasn't even something that I experienced. And just hearing you speak about it, you can just tell it weighs on you a lot. It's like all of a sudden something that you did every day, and now it's no longer there, right? All of a sudden you have to shift your priorities to go find another job so you're not losing your house. Because a lot of people do end up in that situation where they, lose their
Yeah.
money that they can pay for their mortgage. So
Yeah.
it's not
That
easy.
call that was given to me was done at like 4:30 on a Friday. And like that bomb was dropped on me in the last 15 minutes of that job or of that call. And she was
Hmm.
like, so as of the end of this call, like you're terminated. Or like we're gonna be parting ways. And I was like,
Wow.
what? I was like, wait. Like right now? You mean right now? Like this is not a drill. And so yeah, it was just yeah. I think like a
It's
lot
a
of the trauma
lot.
was came from the fact that like I thought I was super close with my manager and I looked up to her so much. And this is not to trash talk her. I still do look up to her a lot, but it's just like in that moment, that rapport that you have is cut
Hmm.
off. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
this is business me now, and business me says we're done here.
Yeah.
And I've heard that from a lot of other people who have been laid off at their companies. Like I had a friend
Hmm.
who worked at that first company that I worked at, one of the big four, and when she was laid off, it's just like her her manager just completely switched off emotions, even though my friend had worked there for like I don't know 4 5 6 years,
Hmm.
and like she was really close to this person. This person
Yeah.
was like invited to her wedding,
Oh
and
wow.
um the manager was just like, it was a pleasure, or it was like thank you for your contributions to this company. And that's it. So it's like, yeah, there's not really any dignity in these kinds of dealings. And if you have trauma from that, don't blame yourself. It's like so natural to be scarred from an experience like that.
Yeah, and I think, and obviously I'm not a manager, I've never been in that situation, but I can just speculate. I do feel like from what you're describing, it seems like the emotions are just turned off and it's just a very business exchange. Like that conversation is no longer a conversation. It's me just telling you you need to leave
Yeah.
without any regards to how that process is handled and how you're going to be afterwards. And I
Mhm.
think managers or maybe even the company itself can kind of work on that process if, hopefully that this thing doesn't happen, but if it's bound to happen, maybe a better training can be implemented to make sure when you're
Yeah.
letting go of your employees, they're not scarred like this, right? Because like you mentioned, you didn't really give yourself the opportunity to process until you had started the new job. I don't know if, because it sounds like maybe you're getting called into a meeting and random meeting gets on your calendar, you're like, oh shit, is this a moment? Is this going to happen again? So
Well,
I don't
no,
know if
it
that
wasn't.
comes up for you.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that feeling of like, hey, can we talk? Oh God.
Yeah.
Hey, can we
What
talk?
is this?
That's like awful. And in
Yeah.
the case of the actual chopping call that I got, it was a regularly scheduled call. So
Mm,
I was like, oh, I have no reason to expect that this is anything out
yeah.
of the ordinary. I even planned on raising the idea of asking for a promotion in that call.
Oh wow. Yeah.
That is how unexpected it was because I had also gotten a
Wow.
raise 2 months prior.
Yeah.
So I was like, who am I to think that I'm going to be on the chopping block during this call?
Yeah. I am glad that you, even if it took you longer, but you gave yourself permission to process those emotions. And I love that you said you can understand the why behind why it happened, but it doesn't mean you don't have the right to be angry. Like it's okay to feel those emotions that you're feeling. You don't have to just keep suppressing them. Be like, oh, it makes sense. You can be upset about it and it could still make sense. So I'm glad that you emphasized that. In terms of, I know you mentioned one aspect of why this job search was unique for you. I do kind of want to dig into something that you had written about was navigating the job search with the title of a data scientist
Mm.
and how that came up for you because your role itself with your previous company was not technically all data science, right? It was like the title didn't match the responsibilities that you had. So how did that play a role when you were job searching? And the reason why I asked that is also, I think a lot of people are in that position who have a title, but their responsibilities don't necessarily align with their title. How would they
Yeah.
navigate their current situation and in the future when they have to do a job search?
Yeah. What I think the mismatch is between the skills that people were attributing to a data scientist
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago in 2021 when the market was super hot versus the skills now that are attributed to that title, which are like now that AI is like all the rage, right? Like you need to have experience with computer vision, NLP models, like super complex stuff that nobody expected you to have in
Yeah.
2021. So I would argue that back in 2021, like I was a data scientist for all intents and
Mm-hmm.
purposes. And then the market swung to a completely different extreme where people are now fighting tooth and nail for that title. And so they're going to put up barriers to
Mm.
entry that were
Wow.
not existing in 2021 when I got this job, or 2022 was when I got it. But yeah, so I don't think like I kind of like make fun of myself and say, hey, like I was a fake data scientist, but like I know a lot of people who are doing the same things that I did, like product analytics, let's see, like marketing analytics and like A/B testing, things like that. And they are not fake data scientists. Like even though
Yeah.
I've poked myself, they do data science. And if you work in data science, you know how amorphous the definition of the field is. Like data scientist could mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's a broad umbrella, and there's so many different things under that umbrella. But
Yeah.
hiring managers and recruiters want one very specific thing under that umbrella that was not the focus in the past.
Mm.
And so these people who might be under a different part of that umbrella now, and if they lose their job like I did, they're going to find that the focus has shifted towards something that they were not working on when they first got that title. And
Yeah.
that was what happened to me. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, it was because I did not take the time to upskill while I was in that job.
Mm.
Um I was just like, I have the title, so I'm set now. I was thinking back to 2020, that 2021, 2022 timeframe when having the title was like it meant a lot more. And now it's just like in 2023, the lights are turned on
Yeah.
and you have to see past the title,
Mm,
because it's so tough in this market, and people no longer just buy into titles.
yeah.
Uh, so it really is that shift in market, in the hiring market dynamics, that contributed to that. And so
Yeah.
it's not me saying, oh, this is all the market's fault, right? Like I said, I didn't take the time to upskill. And so
Mm,
when 2023 came, the economy crashed, and well, that was 2022. The
yeah.
economy crashed, and lights were turned on, and people with titles and skills that they couldn't back up, or like
Mm,
different skills from what the market wants now, they had to scatter like cockroaches in the light. And that was
yeah.
me. That is like the metaphor I think of when I think of myself. It's like somebody turned on the lights, and I was like, oh shoot, I don't have the skills that are necessary to stay in this field.
Yeah.
And so I think, but I was thankful that that happened, because it forced me to pivot really quickly. I realized I was not getting any hits. And when you are in a job search where you have no alternatives and you need that money,
Yeah.
I was like, I have to cut those losses. There's no point in me staying married to this title, because it won't benefit me. Like, I
Mm,
cannot be like, woe is me. I just have to go
yeah.
next thing.
Yeah.
And so that next thing for me was leaning into my content writing skills, and specifically content writing in the data domain. And that is how I came to develop relations, at a data science company, which I think fits my skill set so much better than being a traditional data scientist, in at least right now, in the context of what this job market defines for each of those roles.
I think you summarized that just beautifully. And I love how you went back to your point. Don't be married to a title. Don't be married to where you're currently at, or
Yeah.
just was like a day ago or like a month ago. It's time to make a shift when a shift is required. So adapt with time, adapt with your current circumstances versus a year ago or 2 years ago.
Yeah. And that goes
Yeah.
back to what you said about following your curiosity. Absolutely follow your curiosity.
Yeah.
But when you are in a recession, also follow like the less aspirational thing, which is the skills that you have. Um, when we're not in a recession, absolutely go follow your dreams, go follow like where your heart takes you. But when you are in a recession, like, fall back to the skills that you do have. And I'm not saying that this job right now that I have is a fallback option. But it's like, that's just how you kind of future proof yourself when the economy is not doing so hot. You just have to like
Yeah.
evaluate your skills and like kind of be realistic with them.
Yeah. Let's go after what you're capable of doing at the moment. And while you're in that role, continue to grow. As you said, like upskilling is a big component of getting ahead in your career.
For sure.
I'm going to talk a little bit about, because I know you said LinkedIn has been a great part of your journey and has contributed a lot to your journey and also ties into what you're currently doing, being content creator. And I remember you talking about a little bit of being an introvert, right? And I read a post on it. So you don't come off as an introvert, but I'm going based off your post of Megan being an introvert. How do you, as an introvert, create a personal brand, and how do you continue to show up in the public eye?
I Yeah, you have to lean on the skills that you do have. And for me, that was writing.
Hmm.
Writing was what got me to this current role, and writing is what got me to build up my personal brand to where it is today. And that is my strong suit. So I leaned heavily into that. Things like video creation and like public speaking, those are all also very important parts of my job that scared me to death.
Yeah.
But what I had to do was, hey, how can I take my strengths and apply them to these weak areas? For me, it's like, if I have um a planned talk that I'm giving,
Yeah.
which I signed myself up for this. So I signed myself up for a talk in New York next week that I just did very last minute, because the opportunity was there. And one side of me was like, don't do it. That's so much work. Like, you're gonna
Yeah.
get stressed out. You're gonna regret signing yourself up for this. But then the other part of me also was like, well, if you don't do it, you'll always feel that way. And
Mm,
so I was like, okay, I how do I lean into the skills that I currently have? I can write all of this talk that I have planned
yeah.
out, which is not hard for me to do, because I like writing. And when I
Yeah.
write, like, and I get into that flow state, I'm like, okay, this is my
Yeah.
strong suit. Do that for this talk, right? And then leverage the writing that I've done for like the script that I'm going to say,
Hmm.
and go from there. Like, I don't have to
Yeah.
start from zero, when it comes to these newer areas of building my brand and building my voice. So that's how I justified it when I signed myself up for this talk last minute. I
Yeah.
was like, okay, just take it one step at a time, and write it all out. and go from there. I'm not starting from scratch here. And that has kind of been the theme of this entire job for me, because there are so many things that I did not realize I had to do. I thought I was just like going to be writing content, right? But I've had to give talks, I've had to go to conferences, be on panels. Be on panels.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this scares me to death. But as I went to like a conference last week, my first conference, and I came away with it from it being like, I'm so glad I did that, because it truly, like when you have those growth moments and you instantly realize it's a growth moment for you.
Yeah.
That was that conference for me. And I was riding off of that high when I signed up for this talk that I'll be giving. And I was like, okay, you did it before, you didn't die, and you grew from it. So you can do this one again. And so a lot of it is just like pep talking yourself, but also taking stock of the skills that you do have and figuring out how to apply it to these new areas that you're working on.
Yeah. And I think that example and what you just described kind of goes and ties into the theme of the podcast. It's success beyond our greatest fear. And public speaking, if that scares you, or like putting yourself out there scares you, and you do it once, you're like, oh, nothing happened. Like I'm still alive. I'm okay. Like I'm still intact. And I actually feel good about doing this. And I think you mentioned something like, if I didn't do it, I'm always going to be scared of it. So I need to go face this fear and overcome it. And now you're putting yourself in that fear, like consistently. So there will come a point where you get better at facing it versus running away from it. So I love that for you. I want to hear a little bit more about the talk. Sorry.
Yeah, it's gonna be a pretty technical talk. It's like a talk about machine learning, using machine learning in your data warehouse. And I was telling my CEO, who's my manager, telling my CEO about how I wanted to do this. And I had to pitch it to him and be like, why is this a good idea? And he was like, well, I can tell you really want to do it. And I was like, well, deep down, no, I don't want to do it. Like, this scares the hell out of me. But I told him, I was like, I know I'm going to have to give more of these talks. So why not rip off the Band-Aid now and get that practice in, so that I can do a better job of it down the road. And then he's like, okay. But yeah, like at first when he asked me, I was like, no, I don't want to do this. But like, why am I putting myself in this position? Like, and I do this a lot. And actually, when I think back to it, I'm like, well, yeah, why do I keep putting things on my plate when I'm very overwhelmed at times? It goes back to that trauma of being let go at my last job. Like, I am continuously piling things on my plate because I don't want that same thing to happen to me. And it all goes, it's like it's all full circle when I dig deep and I ask myself, why do I put myself into these situations where I'm forced to grow? It's because in the past, like I guess I wasn't growing and I faced the consequences of that. And now I've swung to the opposite extreme, and I'm like, okay, I can't go back to that. I have to put myself in these opportunities where I have to stretch myself and grow, because I cannot have what happened to me in the past happen again.
Yeah. So how do you find, for you personally, how would you find the balance between where you don't feel like you're growing versus now you're saying you're at the extreme end of saying, now all I want to do is grow and just stretching myself thin, because I'm not sure if that's sustainable.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. And I think that there are like three distinct points in this spectrum. There's like, one, I know I'm not growing and I don't even care. And admittedly, I was kind of in that phase when I was let go. Like I just got way too comfortable. Three is like, I'm just going to like take so much onto my plate and I don't care if I'm overwhelmed. And then somewhere in the middle is that balance of like, is that sustainable balance? And I think how you get to that sustainable balance is truly experiencing both ends of it. Unfortunately, like I don't think anybody just figures out how to maintain that balance off the rip. You have to experience both ends of the spectrum and figure out which parts of both sides you can take and make it sustainable. For me right now, it's not the pace that I'm doing my work is not super sustainable, admittedly, but it's how I'm coping with my trauma right now. And for me, I'm just like, that's okay, because I hope it'll be beneficial that I at least put these processes into play, and like figure out my routine earlier on, so that down the line I'll at least have a reputation that I can deliver results while also knowing how to deliver those results on a consistent basis. But I can't get to that state without experiencing like that stretch phase.
No, I think I'm glad you emphasized the point of that it's not just you're not going to find it like that, right? You're going to have to experience a spectrum of it to find out what works for you. And it's going to be different than what works for someone else. It's going to be different than what works for me. And getting stuck in that comfortability state and getting stuck in that always being on the go state might not be healthy for everyone. And finding wherever you fit on that spectrum will be a journey. And it's not something you have to figure out right now.
Yeah. I also will add that I think another point on this spectrum,
Hmm.
even past the I'm not growing and I don't care point, is I hate my life at this job and I need to freaking get it out. And I have experienced that too.
Hmm.
Um, and like having experienced that is how I can appreciate now having a job where I am challenged and I am stretched every day, but at least I don't freaking hate my life. So it's like you really have to have experienced all points on that spectrum to like figure out what works for you. Um,
Yeah.
and for me personally, I would much rather be working hard every day towards something I care about
Mm.
than to hate my job, much less just not care. I never
Yeah.
want to be on that spectrum. Again, I want to be on like the latter half of that spectrum.
Yeah. Because you know that what works well for you. And I don't think hating your job works for anyone. So that's a fair
No.
statement to make.
Yeah, yeah.
I was going to ask you a few more questions about imposter syndrome, but I think we've covered that throughout our chat. So if there's anything else that you wanted to cover, touch base on just dealing with an imposter syndrome, if that's something that came up for you during your journey as well.
Yeah, I think I'm still very new in my career,
Hmm.
still early on in my career. And imposter syndrome is not something that really goes away, but it is something that I know how to manage better. And that has coincided with me being able to build up my personal brand. So the stronger my personal brand, I think for me is like the more control I have over that imposter
Mm.
syndrome. And maybe some of that is from external validation of
Yeah.
me building my brand and like, putting myself out there and like have a lot of followers, have a lot of like supportive comments. And so
Yeah.
that feeds into me being like, okay, maybe I'm not an imposter. But then
Hmm.
like sometimes you'll see posts from me where I'm like, hey y'all, I am data LinkedIn's biggest imposter. And I'm like openly admit that. And
Yeah.
that is me sort of like poking fun at my own insecurities.
Mm.
And then, but then like an odd thing is people don't are not like, oh yeah, you are an imposter. No, they're like,
Mm.
I face the same exact thing. And so yes, there are like two ways that I've dealt with imposter syndrome is like one, just control your narrative and grow your personal brand so that you can shape others' opinion of you in a way that
Yeah.
you want, but also like own up to your insecurities and you'll find that a lot of people identify with it and feel the same exact way. And then you're just like, oh, like
Oh.
yes, I could try to control my imposter syndrome or I can try to embrace it
Mm.
and understand that I'm not the only one who faces it, and that like it's a very normal thing to feel. And so on a given day, I'll like flip flop between those two things. And I'm like, okay, so like imposter syndrome is just what it is.
Yeah.
And you just have to take it day by day. These days, I'm so busy that I can't even think about like, oh my gosh, this person thinks I'm an imposter. Like it
Yeah.
eventually, it kind of just fades in the background, but it's like, it's
Mm.
always there and you'll figure out ways to manage it.
Yeah, I love, I think you mentioned a point of like, you just need to learn how to acknowledge it, right? And acknowledge the insecurities that you have. And you're going out of your way to even point it out to the whole, to the whole LinkedIn audience. And I think it's great because you're right. No one comes up to you and be like, you know what, you're right. You don't know how to do this. So you are an imposter. No one says that. People are like, oh
Well,
my God,
I've
I'm
had people say,
so,
I
yeah,
have had people say that. And
we're
like,
gonna ignore those people.
right, we can ignore them, but also like you can be like, yeah, these people said these things about me, but did I die? No.
No.
Yeah. Like
I
I'll
love
never
how
talk
that's
to people
the,
again.
yeah, that's the measuring stick. Did anything happen to me? No.
Yeah, that
Those
is, yeah.
opinions, yeah, yeah. And but you're right, because every time I read your post, like in the back of my head, I'm like, I'm so glad someone else is able to verbalize what I'm feeling. And even though I can't verbalize it, but I can read it and I'm like, that's exactly how I'm feeling. And you would share it and it makes me feel like someone else is out there who feels that too. So I feel safe.
Yeah.
I know we have to wrap up soon. On a much lighter note, we'll do a very tiny segment. It's called rapid fire, and it's mostly just questions, like 4 questions actually today. So I'm
Okay.
gonna ask you 4 questions, and you can answer them as fast, as slow as you want. What's one piece of advice that you'd like to give to your younger self?
Don't compare yourself to others.
Hmm.
It's just such a draining thing to compare yourself to others because even when you do compare yourself to somebody and you like envy somebody, that person will still succeed and you're
Hmm.
just going to put yourself down. So it's
Yeah.
like, it's not like by you comparing yourself to others and being like, oh, I wish I had what they had. it's not like that will bring them down to your level.
Mm.
No, you're going to bring yourself even further down from them. So like, what's the point?
See more than it hurts anyone else.
Right, exactly.
What's your favorite memory of all time?
Uh, I off the top of my head, it's when my school UVA won the NCAA basketball championship my last year of college. And
Oh
so
wow.
it
Did
was like
you
it was just
attended?
sorry, say that again.
I said you attended, right, in person?
Yeah, so well, I wasn't at the game, but I was at
Mm.
the festivities afterward when like
Yeah.
everybody stormed like our downtown area and like shooting off fireworks and stuff. And I was like, I don't even care about sports like that, but it was just the camaraderie. And so I felt very proud of being a UVA person at that time. So that's one of my favorite memories.
That's adorable. That's so sweet. What's one habit that you have implemented daily that contributes to your success?
Making my bed. Oh my gosh.
I love that.
I I used to not make my bed ever. And then it started this year and now I can't
Yeah,
not make it. And I'm just like, okay, this is like one piece of my chaotic life that I do have control over and do it every day. And it's just like, okay, I can start
it's so
fresh today.
good.
So I like that.
Yeah, I love that. I had picked up that same habit. Like, I think back in college, I saw someone make their bed. I'm like, you know what? Let me try it, right? And I did
Yeah,
it consistently ever since then. I'm like, wow, this actually feels good. And this is one thing I can say I do every single day.
right, right.
What's one of your most irrational fears that you want to tackle?
Losing my LinkedIn. I don't want
Mm.
to tackle that. I'm not going to tackle that. I've like seen reports of people um like losing access to their LinkedIn lately. It's just
Mm.
like LinkedIn right now is just a like a crapshoot. I like the algorithm is so people say it's because after the LinkedIn layoffs, something happened to the algorithm. People are losing access to their LinkedIn. It is scary. Like knocking on wood, I pray to God that that never happens to me. But you know what? I said that about losing my job previously, and it happened. And
Knock on
I'm
wood.
I'm still here to tell the tale. Actually,
Yeah.
losing my LinkedIn, losing my job, those are like
Mm.
big things.
But you don't want to tackle them.
No, I'm not gonna tackle them. I'm just
That's,
gonna like try to prevent that from happening. You
that's
know,
good. So what's one thing on your bucket list that you do want to do and you haven't because of fear?
haven't because of fear.
Or just any bucket list item that you want to share?
Traveling more.
Mm.
Maybe traveling to like Asia. I this year I went to Europe for the first time to visit my coworkers. I went to Prague and it was so beautiful. And so this job has completely been about doing things that I used to be scared of and like going outside of my comfort zone, going to talks, going to Europe, like traveling a lot. And prior to this role, I never ever wanted to do those things. But now I'm like, I feel
I
myself
like
become
it.
a grown up, like a wholer person from doing these things. So and I'm just like, what's holding me back? Like why am I not like going out there and experiencing life? And so during like this job has really challenged me to do those things because I've seen what it's been like to not challenge yourself. And yeah, it just like time is so limited.
Is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before that we did not get to cover before?
In our society, I think overworking, like working a lot is really frowned upon. And it's like on TikTok, you'll hear the craze about lazy girl jobs, blah, 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 like anti-hustle culture. But I think like, for me, and this ties into everything that we said before, is like there's a time and a place to work really hard in your life.
Mm.
And I'm not saying like it's okay to push yourself to the point of burnout every day. It's not. But as I was saying before, like you have to experience all all like different variations of this spectrum of like working none to working a lot to really understand what drives you and like what works for you. So right now these days I work a lot, but it feels really good to do something and like actually work towards it really hard. This past week I worked on this release for one of our new features
Hmm.
and I was doing it all by myself. I like made two different pieces of writing about it. I made a video about it. I posted it on three different social channels,
Yeah.
sent out emails about it, all in like the span of 2 days, with like no help.
Wow.
And I was like, at the end of that, I was like, I'm burnt. And then the next day, I got acknowledgement from like people from my company who were like,
Hmm.
Megan did this single-handedly, all on her own, and she did it with a super quick turnaround, and she created very quality pieces of content that we never would have gotten without her. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Oh, that
and
feels
so
good.
right, yeah, and so I was like, if I didn't pushed myself, I would have never known what that had felt like. And
Mm-hmm.
so I guess like all I'm trying to say is sometimes it's like it's okay to push yourself.
Yeah.
And like that goes a lot against a lot of rhetoric that people are saying nowadays. It's like, like don't like buy into hustle culture. But like sometimes working hard is necessary. It's like working hard is good for your soul sometimes. And so it really is a balance though. But you can't figure out that balance until you experience like both ends of that seesaw.
Yeah. And I think what you're trying to emphasize, it's like working towards something that is going to push you beyond your limits, because that's how you push your limits, because you can't just continue to stay within your limits for year over year over year, right? You
Yeah.
have to be able to push beyond it, and that's how you get to the success that you want to attain at some point.
Yeah.
And one last question for you. Where can people find you? Where can they connect with you? Where can they search you other than Google and come across your work?
LinkedIn, first and foremost, connect with me there. And then second is on my company's website, Deep Note. That's where I work now, and that's where a lot of my content goes. So if you go on our blog, like you'll find some pieces written by me there. So those are the two places.
Perfect. And I want to thank you, Megan, for taking a lot of time out of your schedule today to interview today and to share your story with us. I'm very grateful and very excited to share this with everyone. So thank you.
I enjoyed this chat so much and catching up.